At 6:15 a.m., Nia Harper's hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from the eviction notice she'd shoved in her coat pocket an hour before. 22 years old, broke, black, working nights cleaning office buildings most people would never see, she stood at a cracked bus stop holding a paper bag she couldn't afford to give away. The white homeless man on the bench, wild beard, hollow eyes, military jacket older than she was, looked up like he always did. She handed him the bag. Coffee, sandwich. Same as every morning for 6 months. Then 3 days later, 3 officers in dress uniforms appeared at her peeling apartment door like pallbearers. "We're here about Elliot Cross," the colonel said, and Nia's blood went ice, because Elliot was the man she'd been feeding, and she had no idea why the military cared. Stay with me until the end of this story. Like and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this journey travels. Nia Harper had learned early that survival wasn't about winning. It was about not losing too fast. At 22, she measured her life in shifts, double shifts, graveyard shifts, the kind that left her smelling like industrial cleaner and regret. She worked for Summit Facilities Management, a company that contracted out the dirty work nobody else wanted to do. Office towers, medical plazas, government buildings downtown. She mopped floors lawyers walked on, emptied trash cans executives never thought about, wiped down conference tables where decisions got made that would never include her. The pay was $11.50 an hour. No benefits, no sick days. If she didn't show up, she didn't eat. Her apartment was a 4th-floor walk-up in the Northgate complex, a sagging brick building where the heat worked 3 days a week, and the landlord's voicemail was always full. Rent was $875 a month, due on the 1st, late on the 5th, locked out by the 10th. She'd been late 4 times this year. The notices piled up on her kitchen counter like bad news she couldn't outrun. Still, every morning at 6:15 a.m., Nia stood at the Elmwood Avenue bus stop with a paper bag in her hands. Inside, 1 large black coffee from the corner bodega, 1 egg and cheese sandwich, no meat. She couldn't afford bacon. A napkin, sometimes a granola bar if she had extra change. She didn't do it for gratitude. She didn't do it for karma or recognition or to feel good about herself. She did it because the man on the bench looked like he'd stopped expecting anything from anyone, and that kind of emptiness scared her more than her own. His name, she'd learned after 3 weeks of silent handoffs, was Elliot. Elliot Cross. White man, maybe 50, maybe 60, hard to tell under the beard and the grime. He wore the same clothes every day, ripped jeans, a stained thermal shirt, and a military jacket so faded the patches were ghosts. His boots were held together with duct tape. His hands were scarred and calloused, nails cracked, fingers that shook when he reached for the bag. He never asked for it, never begged, just sat there on the bench, staring at nothing, like the world had gone on without him, and he'd stopped trying to catch up. The first time Nia gave him food, he looked at her like she'd made a mistake. "You sure?" he'd asked, voice rough as gravel. "I'm sure." "Don't need charity?" "Good. I'm not giving charity. I'm giving breakfast." He took the bag. Didn't say thank you, just nodded once, slow, like he was remembering something he'd forgotten a long time ago. That was 6 months ago. Now it was routine. Nia's internal clock didn't need an alarm anymore. She woke at 5:30, stumbled into the shower if the water was hot, pulled on her work uniform, black pants, black polo, name tag she never wore, and walked 4 blocks to the bodega. Jose, the owner, had her order ready before she asked. "The usual?" "Yeah." "You feeding that guy again?" "Yeah." "He pay you back yet?" Nia smiled, tired. "Not how it works, Jose." "You're a better person than me, mija." "I'm just a person." She paid $4.75, left a $1 tip she couldn't afford, and walked another 2 blocks to the bus stop. Elliot was always there. Rain, snow, heat, didn't matter. He had nowhere else to go. This morning was no different. The sky was the color of old concrete, low clouds threatening rain. The streetlights were still on. A few cars drifted past, headlights cutting through the early fog. Nia's breath puffed white in the October cold. Elliot sat on the bench, hunched forward, hands tucked into his jacket. He didn't look up when she approached. "Morning," Nia said. He glanced at her, eyes red-rimmed, face gaunt. Morning. She handed him the bag. He took it, set it on his lap, didn't open it yet. Just held it like it was something fragile. Cold today, Nia said. Yeah. Supposed to drop more tonight. Always does. She waited, like she always did. Sometimes he talked, sometimes he didn't. She never pushed. You working today? He asked. Double shift, downtown clinic, then the Riverside building. That's a long day. It's rent. Elliot nodded slowly. Rent's a bastard. Yeah. He opened the bag, pulled out the coffee, took a long sip. His hands steadied. He looked at the sandwich, then at her. You eat yet? I'm good. You always say that. Because it's always true? Liar. Nia smiled despite herself. Eat your sandwich, Elliot. He unwrapped it, took a bite, chewed slow. For a moment, the hardness in his face softened. Just a flicker. Then it was gone. You ever think about helicopters? He asked suddenly. Nia blinked. What? Helicopters. Big ones. Black ones. The kind that don't show up on maps. Can't say I do. I do. All the time. He stared past her, into the middle distance. Used to fly 'em. Long time ago. Missions nobody talks about. Places that don't exist. Nia had heard fragments like this before. Elliot spoke in riddles sometimes, pieces of a puzzle she didn't have the edges for. She didn't know if it was trauma, delusion, or something in between. You were military? She asked gently. Was a lot of things. Army, Navy. Doesn't matter now. It might. He looked at her then, really looked, and for a second she saw something sharp behind the fog, something that hadn't been broken all the way down. You're a good kid, he said quietly. I'm 22. Still a kid to me. She let it sit. The bus hissed to a stop across the street, doors folding open. A handful of early shift workers climbed aboard, faces blank, eyes half closed. That's mine, Nia said. Go on then. You gonna be okay? Always am. Elliot, go. Don't miss your shift. She hesitated, then nodded. See you tomorrow. Yeah. Nia crossed the street, climbed onto the bus, swiped her card. The driver didn't look at her. She found a seat near the back, pressed her forehead against the cold window, and watched Elliot through the glass. He sat alone on the bench, paper bag in his lap, steam rising from the coffee cup, and for a moment, just a moment, he looked like a man who'd been left behind by everyone who was supposed to remember him. The bus pulled away. Nia closed her eyes. The clinic shift was brutal. Summit had her cleaning the North Point Health Center, a sprawling urgent care facility on the east side. 3 floors, 12 exam rooms, 2 waiting areas, bathrooms that saw more traffic than a highway rest stop. Nia's job was to make it all look like nobody had ever been sick there. She worked alone. No team, no partner, just her and a rolling cart full of disinfectant, mops, trash bags, and gloves that never fit right. She started on the 3rd floor and worked her way down, room by room, surface by surface. Wipe down the tables, empty the sharps containers, scrub the sinks, mop the floors, bag the trash, repeat. Her supervisor, a man named Greg, who wore too much cologne and never remembered her name, checked in once around noon. You're behind schedule, he said, not looking up from his clipboard. I'm on pace. 3rd floor should have been done an hour ago. 3rd floor had a biohazard spill in the hallway. I had to double clean. Not my problem. Stay on pace or you're off the schedule next week. He walked away before she could respond. Nia clenched her jaw, pulled off her gloves, threw them in the trash harder than necessary, and kept moving. By 3 p.m., her back ached. Her knees throbbed. Her hands were raw from the chemicals. She hadn't eaten since the granola bar at 10 a.m., and her stomach was starting to protest. She finished the clinic at 4:15, clocked out, and took 2 buses across town to the Riverside building, a 10-story office complex that housed law firms, consultants, and a corporate tax service that took up half the 5th floor. Her second shift started at 5 p.m. and ran until midnight. Same work, different building, same exhaustion. She moved through the floors like a ghost, invisible to the people still working late. They didn't see her, didn't acknowledge her. She was part of the furniture, something that happened after hours, like the cleaning was done by magic. Around 9 p.m., as she was emptying a trash can in a corner office when she found the envelope. It was sitting on top of the garbage, crisp, white, sealed, with no name on it. Just sitting there like it had been tossed by accident. Nia picked it up, turned it over. No writing, no address, just a blank envelope, sealed tight. She hesitated, then set it on the desk. Not her business. But as she turned to leave, something stopped her. She looked back at the envelope. It reminded her of Elliot, the way he talked sometimes, in fragments and codes, like there were things he wasn't allowed to say out loud. She shook her head, dismissed the thought, and finished her shift. The next morning, Nia woke to the sound of her phone buzzing. She grabbed it off the nightstand, squinted at the screen. Unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, it rang again, same number. She answered, groggy. Hello? Is this Nia Harper? Male voice, professional, clipped. Who's asking? My name is Lieutenant Colonel Raymond Duval, United States Army. I need to speak with you about Elliot Cross. Nia sat up fast, heart pounding. What? Why? I'd prefer to do this in person. Are you available this morning? What's going on? Is Elliot okay? That's what I'm trying to determine. Are you at 428 Northgate, apartment 4C? Nia's blood went cold. How do you know where I live? Miss Harper, I'll be at your door in 15 minutes. Please be dressed. The line went dead. Nia stared at her phone, hands shaking. What the hell was happening? She threw on jeans and a sweatshirt, splashed water on her face, and paced her tiny living room. Her mind raced. Army. Lieutenant Colonel. Elliot's name. Had he done something? Was he in trouble? Was she? At exactly 6:42 a.m., 3 sharp knocks echoed through her apartment. Nia opened the door. 3 men stood in the hallway, all in army dress uniforms, crisp, dark, metals gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The one in front was tall, broad-shouldered, mid-50s, with silver hair and a face like carved stone. Ms. Harper? Yes. Lieutenant Colonel Raymond Duval. He didn't offer his hand. These are Captain Morris and Sergeant Ortiz. May we come in? Nia stepped aside, numb. They entered, filling her small space like they owned it. Duval scanned the room, quick, efficient, taking in the eviction notices on the counter, the unmade futon, the single chair at the kitchen table. You know Elliot Cross, Duval said. Not a question. Yeah, I give him breakfast sometimes, at the bus stop. How long? 6 months, maybe. How did you meet him? I didn't. He was just there one day. I started bringing him food, that's it. Duval exchanged a glance with Morris. Miss Harper, what has Elliot told you about himself? Not much. He talks sometimes about helicopters, missions, things that don't make a lot of sense. Did he ever mention where he served? No. Did he give you anything? Documents, photos, anything at all? Nia's throat tightened. No. Why? What's going on? Duval stepped closer. Elliot Cross is a person of interest in an ongoing military investigation. We need to locate him. When was the last time you saw him? Yesterday morning, at the bus stop. And he seemed normal? He seemed like Elliot, which is? Tired, broken, like someone who's been forgotten. Duval's jaw tightened. He pulled a photo from his jacket, held it up. It was Elliot, but not the Elliot she knew. This Elliot was clean-shaven, sharp-eyed, standing in full dress uniform beside men in suits. The photo looked official, important. Is this the man you've been feeding? Duval asked. Nia stared at the photo, heart hammering. Yeah, that's him. Duval took the photo back, slid it into his jacket. If he contacts you, if he shows up, if he calls, if he gives you anything, you contact me immediately. He handed her a card, heavy stock, embossed lettering. This is serious, Ms. Harper. Do you understand? Nia nodded, barely breathing. Good. The 3 men turned and walked out, footsteps echoing down the stairwell. Nia stood in her doorway, card trembling in her hand, and one thought burned through her mind. What the hell had Elliot been involved in? She didn't go to work that day. She called in sick, first time in 8 months, and spent the morning pacing her apartment, staring at the card, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Elliot Cross. Person of interest. Military investigation. The man who sat on a bench every morning, who talked about helicopters and missions that didn't exist, who looked like the world had chewed him up and spit him out. That man was connected to something big enough to bring uniformed officers to her door. At 11 a.m., Nia couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed her coat and walked to the bus stop. Elliot wasn't there. She waited. An hour passed. Then 2. He didn't show. Nia's chest tightened. She pulled out her phone, stared at Duval's card, then put it away. Not yet. She walked the surrounding blocks, checking alleys, doorways, the spots where she'd seen other homeless men gather. Nothing. By evening, she was frantic. She returned to the bus stop one more time, sat on the bench where Elliot always sat, and stared at the empty street. "Where are you?" she whispered. The wind picked up, cold and sharp, and the first drops of rain began to fall. Nia pulled her hood up and waited. 3 days later, Elliot reappeared. Nia almost didn't recognize him. He was thinner, alarmingly so. His face was hollowed out, eyes sunken, skin pale. And across his left side, just visible under his jacket, was a fresh surgical scar, long, clean, still pink. He sat on the bench like he'd never left. Nia ran across the street, breathless. "Elliot, where the hell have you been?" He looked up, slow, like moving his head took effort. "Around. You've been gone for days. People came looking for you. Military, officers, I know." "You know?" He reached into his jacket, pulled out a sealed envelope, white, crisp, identical to the one she'd found at the Riverside building. He pressed it into her hands. His fingers were ice cold. "If anything happens to me," he said quietly, "mail this." "Elliot, what?" "Don't open it. Don't read it. Just mail it. Address is on the back." Nia turned the envelope over. In shaky handwriting, General Marion Sloan, Department of Defense. Inspector General Pentagon, Washington, D.C. "Elliot, what is this?" "Insurance." "For what?" He stood, slower than usual, wincing. "You're a good kid, Nia. Don't get mixed up in my mess. You're already mixing me up. They came to my apartment." "I'm sorry." "Sorry? That's it?" He looked at her, and for the first time she saw fear in his eyes. Real fear. "Just promise me," he said. "If something happens, mail it." "Nothing's going to happen." "Promise me." Nia swallowed hard, envelope trembling in her hands. "I promise." Elliot nodded once, then turned and walked away, limping slightly, disappearing into the early morning fog. Nia stood there, alone, holding a letter she didn't understand, addressed to a general she'd never heard of, and one certainty settled in her chest like a stone. Whatever Elliot Cross had been involved in, it wasn't over. And she was already part of it. Nia didn't sleep that night. She sat at her kitchen table, the envelope in front of her like evidence she shouldn't be holding, and tried to make sense of the impossible. The surgical scar. The fear in Elliot's eyes. The way he'd limped away like a man who knew his time was running out. She picked up the envelope, turned it over in her hands. The seal was tight, professional. The handwriting on the back, shaky but deliberate, felt like a last will and testament written by someone who'd already started dying. General Marion Sloan, Department of Defense Inspector General, Pentagon. Nia pulled out her phone and searched the name. The results came back immediately. Sloan's official Pentagon photo showed a woman in her 60s, steel gray hair pulled back tight, uniform covered in ribbons and commendations, eyes that looked like they'd prosecuted war crimes and budget fraud with equal precision. Her title? Deputy Inspector General for Special Investigations. Her reputation? The woman you sent in when corruption had roots too deep for normal channels. Nia set her phone down, heart pounding. Why would Elliot have a letter for someone like that? She thought about opening it. Her fingers traced the edge of the seal. Just a small tear. Just enough to see what was inside. But Elliot's voice echoed in her head. Don't open it. Don't read it. Just mail it. She shoved the envelope into her kitchen drawer beneath old bills and takeout menus, and tried to convince herself that everything would be fine. It wasn't. The next morning, Elliot wasn't at the bus stop. Nia waited 20 minutes, coffee growing cold in her hand, scanning every face that passed, every shadow in every doorway. Nothing. She left the paper bag on the bench, just in case, and took the bus to work. The day dragged. Her supervisor yelled at her for missing a trash can on the second floor. A nurse snapped at her for mopping too close to the medication cart. By the time her shift ended, Nia's hands were shaking from exhaustion and something darker, dread that sat in her stomach like swallowed glass. She took the bus back to Elmwood Avenue and walked the route she'd started walking every evening, the alleys behind the bodega, the loading dock where homeless men sometimes slept, the overpass where shopping carts full of belongings lined the concrete. No Elliot. She asked around, showed his picture, the one from her phone, a grainy shot she'd taken weeks ago when he'd been half asleep on the bench and she'd wanted to remember that someone cared enough to check on him. An older woman with a grocery cart shook her head. Haven't seen him in days, baby. A man missing teeth squinted at the photo. Cross? Yeah, he was around. Then he wasn't. Happens. Where would he go? The man shrugged. Nowhere good. Nia kept searching until the streetlights came on and her legs gave out. She sat on the bus stop bench exactly where Elliot used to sit and stared at the empty street. Where are you? She whispered again, but the wind didn't answer. On the fourth day, Nia's phone rang at 2 a.m. She jolted awake, fumbled for it in the dark, heart racing. Unknown number. Hello? Heavy breathing, ragged, wet. Elliot? Nia. His voice was barely there, crushed under pain. I need help. She sat up fast, adrenaline flooding her system. Where are you? Corner of Madison and 5th, behind the old church. I'm coming. Stay there. Don't move. Can't move. The line went dead. Nia threw on clothes, grabbed her keys, and ran. She didn't have a car, couldn't afford one, so she called the only person she knew who did, her cousin Marcus, who worked nights at a warehouse across town. He answered on the third ring, groggy. Nia, it's 2 in the damn morning. I need your car, right now. What? Why? I can't explain. Please, Marcus, it's life or death. Silence. Then, I'm at the warehouse. Get here fast. Nia ran 6 blocks, lungs burning, and found Marcus waiting in the parking lot, keys in hand, face tight with worry. You in trouble? He asked. Not me. Someone else. I'll explain later. You better. She took the keys, climbed into his beat-up Honda, and drove across the city like the devil was chasing her. Madison and 5th was a dead zone. Abandoned storefronts, chain-link fences, a church that had been boarded up for a decade. Nia parked under a broken streetlight and got out, scanning the shadows. Elliot? No answer. She moved toward the church, pulling out her phone, using the flashlight to cut through the dark. Behind the building, tucked against a dumpster, she found him. Elliot was on his side, curled up, blood soaking through his jacket. His face was gray, lips cracked, breathing shallow and fast. Oh my God! Nia dropped to her knees beside him. What happened? Doesn't matter. He coughed, wet and rattling. Blood flecked his lips. I'm calling an ambulance. No. His hand shot out, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. No hospitals. Elliot, you're bleeding. They'll find me. Who? Doesn't matter. Just the letter. You still have it? Yes. Good. His grip loosened. If I don't make it, mail it. You're going to make it. I'm getting you help. Nia, I don't care what you say. You're not dying in an alley. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911. The operator answered. 911, what's your emergency? I need an ambulance, Madison and 5th, behind the old Baptist church. Man down, bleeding, unresponsive. Is he breathing? Barely. Stay on the line. Help is on the way. Nia stayed on her knees, one hand pressing against Elliot's side where the blood was worst, the other holding the phone. He looked up at her, eyes unfocused, and something in his expression broke her heart. You didn't have to do this, he whispered. Yeah, I did. Why? Because nobody else would. The sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder, and for a moment Elliot's face twisted, not in pain, but in something like grief. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what?" "For dragging you into this." "You didn't drag me anywhere. I walked in on my own." The ambulance pulled up, lights flashing red and white across the brick walls. Paramedics jumped out, rushed over, took one look at Elliot, and started barking orders. "Gunshot wound, left side, heavy bleeding. BP's dropping. Get him on the gurney, now." They worked fast, professional, lifting Elliot onto the stretcher. He tried to say something, but the oxygen mask went over his face, and the words died. One of the paramedics turned to Nia. "You family?" "No. Friend." "You riding with us?" Nia hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah." She climbed into the back of the ambulance, sat on the bench beside the stretcher, and watched the paramedics fight to keep Elliot alive as the sirens screamed through the empty streets. The hospital was chaos. Elliot was rushed into the ER, doors slamming shut behind him, leaving Nia alone in a waiting room that smelled like antiseptic and desperation. She sat in a plastic chair, still wearing her coat, hands stained with Elliot's blood, and waited. An hour passed. Then 2. Finally, a nurse appeared, middle-aged, tired, clipboard in hand. "You came in with the gunshot victim?" Nia stood. "Yeah, how is he?" "Stable. For now. He lost a lot of blood, but the bullet missed anything vital. He's lucky." "Can I see him?" "Not yet. He's in recovery, but I need some information. Name?" "Elliot Cross." The nurse wrote it down. "Date of birth?" "I don't know." "Address?" "He's homeless." The nurse looked up, expression shifting. "No permanent residence?" "No." "Insurance?" "I don't think so." The nurse sighed, set her pen down. "Okay, we'll do what we can, but without insurance or identification, he'll be transferred to county care as soon as he's stable." "Wait, what does that mean?" "It means he'll be moved to a public facility. We don't have the resources to keep uninsured patients long term." Nia's stomach dropped. "You're just going to dump him?" "We're not dumping anyone. We're following protocol. He's a veteran. He served. Doesn't that count for something?" The nurse's expression softened slightly. "If he's a veteran, he should be going through the VA. Do you have proof of service?" "No, but he told me. He flew helicopters, classified missions." The nurse's skepticism was palpable. "A lot of people say things like that. Without documentation, there's nothing we can do." "Then let me find documentation." "Ma'am, please just give me time. Don't transfer him yet." The nurse hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I'll note it in his file, but if we don't get confirmation in the next 48 hours, he's moving to county." "Thank you." The nurse walked away and Nia stood there, mind racing. She needed proof. Military records. Something that would prove Elliot was who he said he was. She pulled out her phone and called the only person who might have answers. Lieutenant Colonel Duval. The phone rang 4 times before he picked up. "Duval." "It's Nia Harper. Elliot's in the hospital." Silence. Then, "What happened?" "Gunshot wound. He called me. I found him bleeding out behind a church. He's stable now, but the hospital's trying to transfer him to county unless I can prove he's a veteran." "Where are you?" "St. Catherine's, downtown." "I'll be there in 30 minutes. Don't talk to anyone else." He hung up. Nia sat back down, heart pounding, and waited. True to his word, Duval appeared exactly 30 minutes later, still in uniform, flanked by Captain Morris. He scanned the waiting room, spotted Nia, and walked over. "Where is he?" "Recovery. They won't let me see him yet." Duval turned to Morris. "Get me access. Now." Morris nodded and disappeared through the double doors. Duval sat down beside Nia, voice low. "Tell me everything." She did. The phone call. The alley. The blood. The ambulance. The nurse's threat to transfer him. When she finished, Duval's jaw was tight. "Did he say who shot him?" "No, he just said they'll find me." "Who's they?" Duval didn't answer. He stood, pulled out his phone, made a call. "This is Lieutenant Colonel Duval. I need a priority records pull on Elliot James Cross. Service number." He rattled off a string of numbers from memory. "Yes, immediately." He hung up, looked at Nia. Stay here. Wait, what's going on? Who is Elliot really? Duval's expression darkened. Someone who should never have ended up on the street. Before she could ask more, Morris returned. We have access. He's in room 12. Duval walked through the doors without looking back. Nia sat alone, hands trembling, and realized she'd just opened a door she might not be able to close. 20 minutes later, Duval returned. His face was unreadable. He's sedated, stable. The hospital confirmed the gunshot was through and through. No major damage. He'll recover. And the transfer? Not happening. I pulled his service record. He's going to the VA. Nia exhaled, relief flooding through her. Thank you. Duval sat down, leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Ms. Harper, I need you to understand something. Elliot Cross isn't just a homeless veteran. His file is classified. Most of his service record is redacted. What I can tell you is that he flew Black Hawk helicopters for a special operations unit that officially doesn't exist. He ran missions in places we're not supposed to talk about. And when he came home, the system buried him. Why? Because the work he did was so classified that even his benefits got tangled in red tape. Approvals that needed clearances, clearances that needed approvals. It's a cycle designed to protect secrets, not people. And Elliot fell through the cracks. Nia's throat tightened. So you just left him on the street? I didn't leave him anywhere. I didn't even know he existed until 3 weeks ago. Then how did you find out? Duval looked at her for a long moment, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph. It was the same one he'd shown her before. Elliot, in full dress uniform, standing beside men in suits. But this time, Nia looked closer. One of the men in suits had a face she recognized from news reports. A senator, high-ranking, powerful. Elliot was part of something big, Duval said quietly, and people with power don't like being reminded of the things they'd rather forget. Is that why someone shot him? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. Nia handed the photo back, mind reeling. He gave me something. Before all this, an envelope, addressed to a general. Duval's eyes sharpened. What general? Marion Sloan. Duval went very still. Do you still have it? Yeah. Where? At home. Don't open it, don't lose it, and don't tell anyone else about it. Why? What's in it? I don't know. But if Elliot addressed it to Sloan, it's because he trusts her to do something the rest of us can't. He stood. I'll arrange transport to the VA facility. You should go home. Get some rest. I want to see him first. He's sedated. He won't know you're there. I don't care. Duval studied her, then nodded. 5 minutes. Elliot looked smaller in the hospital bed. The machines beeped steadily, monitors tracking his heartbeat, oxygen levels, blood pressure. His face was pale, beard matted with dried blood, but his breathing was even. Steady. Nia stood beside the bed, hands in her pockets, and didn't know what to say. I kept my promise, she finally whispered. You're still here, and I'm not leaving until I know you're okay. Elliot didn't respond. The sedation kept him under, somewhere far away from pain, but his hand, resting on the blanket, twitched slightly, like some part of him heard her. Nia reached out, squeezed his fingers gently, then let go. I'll mail the letter if I have to, she said. But you're going to wake up and tell me why yourself. She turned and walked out, leaving Elliot to the machines and the silence. The VA facility was 40 minutes outside the city, a sprawling complex of low buildings surrounded by chain-link fences and too much concrete. Nia visited 3 times a week, taking buses that ran irregular routes, walking the last mile when the schedule didn't line up. Elliot was awake by the second visit. He looked better, clean-shaven, color back in his face, the haunted edge in his eyes dulled by medication and rest. But when he saw Nia, something in his expression cracked. You shouldn't be here, he said. Too bad. I'm here. Nia, don't. You called me. You trusted me. So now you get to deal with me showing up. He looked away, jaw tight. I didn't want you involved. Well, I am, so start talking. Elliot was quiet for a long time. Then, slowly, he started to speak. I flew helicopters for 15 years. Blackhawks, special ops, the kind of missions that don't get written down. We pulled people out of places they weren't supposed to be. We delivered things that weren't supposed to exist. And when it was over, they told us to forget everything we'd seen. And you did? I tried, but you can't forget some things. The faces, the screams, the bodies we left behind because there wasn't room on the bird. His hands clenched. I came home broken. PTSD, nightmares. I couldn't hold down a job, couldn't sleep, couldn't trust anyone. I applied for benefits through the VA, full disability, mental health coverage, housing assistance, everything I was promised. What happened? My file got flagged. Classified service meant classified approval. I needed clearance to access my own medical records. I needed 3 signatures from people who'd been reassigned or retired. The process took months, then years. And while I waited, I lost everything. My apartment, my savings, my dignity. He looked at her, eyes hard. The system didn't fail me, Nia. It buried me on purpose. Why? Because people like me are inconvenient. We know things. We saw things. And if we start talking, asking questions, demanding answers, it's easier to let us disappear. Nia's chest tightened. The letter. What's in it? Elliot's expression shifted. Everything. Names, dates, missions, the things they don't want anyone to know. And you're sending it to General Sloan? She's the only one with the authority and the spine to do something about it. He leaned back against the pillow, exhausted. But I need you to promise me something. What? If I don't make it out of here, if something happens, you mail that letter, no matter what anyone tells you, no matter who tries to stop you. Nothing's going to happen. Promise me, Nia. She swallowed hard. I promise. Elliot closed his eyes, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked almost peaceful. Thank you, he whispered. Nia stayed until visiting hours ended, then took the long bus ride home, the weight of the promise settling into her bones like lead. 2 weeks later, Elliot died. The call came at 4 a.m. A VA nurse, voice clinical and detached. Ms. Harper, I'm calling about Elliot Cross. I'm sorry to inform you he passed away early this morning. Cardiac arrest. We did everything we could. Nia sat on the edge of her bed, phone pressed to her ear, and felt the world tilt. What? Her voice was barely there. He didn't suffer. It was very quick. But he was stable. You said he was recovering. Sometimes complications arise. I'm very sorry. The line went quiet. Nia hung up, hands shaking, and stared at the wall. Elliot was gone. The man she'd fed every morning for 6 months. The man who'd trusted her with a letter that could burn down careers. The man who'd looked at her like she was the first person in years to see him as human. Gone. She didn't cry. Not yet. The grief was too big, too sharp, stuck somewhere between her lungs and her throat. Instead, she walked to the kitchen, opened the drawer, and pulled out the envelope. It sat in her hands, heavier than it should be. Nia turned it over, looked at the address, and made a decision. She was going to mail it. Not because Elliot had asked, because he'd been right. The system had buried him, and if she didn't speak for him now, no one ever would. She didn't mail it right away. For 3 days, the envelope sat on her kitchen table like a loaded gun she didn't know how to fire. Nia circled it, stared at it, picked it up, and set it down a dozen times, her mind a war between obligation and terror. Elliot had trusted her with something that mattered, something people had maybe killed him for, and now she was supposed to just drop it in a mailbox and hope it reached the right hands? What if it didn't? What if it disappeared into the Pentagon's bureaucracy, shredded by some low-level clerk who didn't know what they were destroying? What if sending it put a target on her back the same way it had on Elliot's? But every time doubt crept in, she heard his voice. If something happens to me, mail this. He'd known. He'd known he was running out of time, and he'd still trusted her to finish what he couldn't. On the 4th day, Nia walked to the post office. It was a gray Saturday morning, the kind where the cold seeped through your coat no matter how many layers you wore. The post office was nearly empty, just a bored clerk behind bulletproof glass and an elderly man mailing Christmas cards in March. Nia approached the counter, envelope in hand, and hesitated. The clerk looked up. Help you? I need to mail this, certified, with tracking. Where's it going? Pentagon, Washington, D.C. The clerk raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. She took the envelope, weighed it, printed a label, and slid a receipt across the counter. That'll be $8.47. Nia handed over a $10 bill, took the change, and watched the clerk toss the envelope into a bin behind her like it was junk mail. Just like that, it was gone. Nia walked out into the cold, hands shaking, and wondered if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life, or the only choice that mattered. 2 weeks passed. Nothing happened. No phone calls, no visits, no acknowledgement that the letter had even been received. Nia went back to work, back to double shifts and cleaning floors and pretending her world hadn't been turned inside out. But the waiting gnawed at her, a constant low hum of anxiety she couldn't shake. She checked the tracking number obsessively. The envelope had been delivered to the Pentagon on a Tuesday afternoon, signed for by someone named R. Carver. After that, silence. Maybe it had been intercepted. Maybe it had been buried. Maybe Elliot's last desperate act of defiance had been swallowed whole by the same system that had destroyed him. Or maybe, Nia let herself hope just a little, maybe someone was reading it. Someone who cared. She visited Elliot's grave once, a small plot in a veteran's cemetery on the outskirts of the city. The VA had arranged the burial. No service, no mourners, just a plain headstone with his name and dates. Nia stood there for an hour, hands in her pockets, and talked to him like he could hear her. I mailed it, she said quietly. I don't know if it'll do anything. I don't know if anyone will care. But I kept my promise. The wind rustled through the trees, cold and indifferent, and Nia wiped her eyes before the tears could freeze on her face. You deserved better, she whispered. You deserved so much better. She left a single flower on the grave, a cheap carnation from the gas station, and walked back to the bus stop alone. The call came on a Tuesday in late September. Nia was mopping the third floor of the North Point Clinic, headphones in, halfway through a playlist that had stopped registering an hour ago when her phone buzzed in her pocket. She almost ignored it. Her supervisor had already yelled at her twice that week for checking her phone on the clock, but something made her pull it out. Unknown number. She answered, stepping into an empty exam room. Hello? Ms. Harper? The voice was female, crisp, professional, no warmth but no hostility either. Yeah, who's this? My name is Colonel Iris Tamblyn. I'm calling on behalf of General Marion Sloan. Do you have a moment to speak? Nia's heart stopped. The general? Yes, ma'am. She received correspondence from the late Elliot Cross. Your name was mentioned prominently in the letter. General Sloan would like to meet with you in person. What? Why? She'll explain everything when you arrive. Are you available to travel to Washington, D.C. this week? Nia's mind reeled. Washington, the Pentagon, the general who'd received Elliot's letter actually wanted to see her. I work. I can't just leave. We'll arrange everything. Transportation, lodging, compensation for missed work. All you need to do is say yes. Nia leaned against the wall, legs suddenly weak. What does she want from me? She wants to hear your story, Ms. Harper, and she wants you to hear hers. Nia closed her eyes, thought of Elliot sitting on that bench every morning, thought of the envelope she'd mailed with shaking hands, thought of the promise she'd made to a dying man. Okay, she said. I'll come. Excellent. Someone will contact you within 24 hours with travel details. Thank you, Ms. Harper. The line went dead. Nia stood in the empty exam room, phone still pressed to her ear, and felt the ground shift beneath her feet. The plane ticket arrived via email 6 hours later. First class. Direct flight. A car service would pick her up at Reagan National and take her straight to the Pentagon. Hotel accommodations included. Meals covered. A per diem of $200 for incidentals. Nia stared at the email, read it 3 times, and still couldn't believe it was real. She called her supervisor, told him she had a family emergency and needed 3 days off. He grumbled but approved it, probably because firing her meant finding someone else willing to work for $11.50 an hour. She called Marcus, told him she was going to D.C. For what? he asked, suspicious. I can't explain yet, but it's important. You in trouble? No, the opposite, I think. That doesn't make me feel better. I'll be back in 3 days, I promise. Marcus sighed. You better call me when you land. I will. She hung up, packed a small duffel bag with the only professional clothes she owned, black slacks, a white blouse, a blazer she'd bought at Goodwill for a job interview 2 years ago, and tried to sleep. She didn't. The flight was surreal. Nia had never flown first class. Hell, she'd only flown twice in her life, both times in middle seats with her knees jammed against the seat in front of her. But this? Leather seats that reclined into beds. A flight attendant who called her by name and brought her sparkling water in a real glass. Warm towels. A hot meal that didn't come in a plastic tray. She felt like an imposter. The man next to her, 50s, expensive suit, reading the Wall Street Journal, glanced at her once, took in her Goodwill blazer and scuffed sneakers, and went back to his paper without a word. Nia stared out the window at the clouds and wondered what the hell she was walking into. The car service was waiting when she landed, a black sedan with government plates and a driver who didn't make small talk. He drove her through D.C. traffic, past monuments and federal buildings that looked like marble temples, and pulled up to a security checkpoint outside the Pentagon. The driver handed over credentials. A guard checked Nia's ID, scanned her name on a list, and waved them through. The Pentagon was massive. Nia had seen it in photos, but nothing prepared her for the scale of it in person. 5-sided, brutalist, a fortress built to project power. The car stopped at a side entrance. The driver opened her door. Someone will meet you inside, he said. Nia got out, duffel bag in hand, and walked through the doors into a world she didn't belong in. Colonel Tamblyn was waiting in the lobby. Tall, black, mid-40s, wearing a uniform so crisp it could cut glass. She extended a hand. Miss Harper, thank you for coming. Nia shook it, trying not to look as terrified as she felt. Thank you for whatever this is. Tamblyn's expression softened slightly. I know this is overwhelming. General Sloan will explain everything. Follow me. They walked through hallways that smelled like floor wax and old power, past offices with closed doors and serious faces, up elevators that required keycards, through checkpoints where armed guards nodded at Tamblyn and studied Nia like she might be smuggling contraband. Finally, they stopped outside a door marked Inspector General, Special Investigations. Tamblyn knocked once, then opened it. General, Miss Harper is here. Send her in. Tamblyn stepped aside. Nia walked through. The office was smaller than she'd expected, no grand desk, no flags, no wall of commendations. Just a functional workspace with filing cabinets, a computer, and a woman sitting behind a desk who looked exactly like her photo. Steel gray hair, sharp eyes, a face that had seen too much to be impressed by bullshit. General Marion Sloan stood, came around the desk, and extended her hand. Ms. Harper, I'm glad you're here. Nia shook her hand, voice barely steady. Thank you for... I don't even know what to say. Sit, please. Nia sat. Sloan took the chair across from her, not behind the desk, a deliberate choice that felt less like an interrogation and more like a conversation. I received Elliot Cross's letter 3 weeks ago, Sloan began. It was forwarded through several channels before it reached me. When I finally read it, I spent 2 days confirming everything he wrote. And then I spent another week deciding what to do about it. What did he write? Nia asked. Sloan pulled a folder from the desk, opened it, and slid a document across to Nia. It was the letter, or a copy of it, typed, single-spaced, 6 pages long. Nia picked it up, hands trembling, and started to read. The first paragraph hit like a freight train. To General Marion Sloan. My name is Elliot James Cross. I served 15 years in the United States Army as a special operations pilot. I flew missions that do not exist in official records. I transported personnel and materials that were never logged. I witnessed events that were never reported. And when I came home, the system that sent me into those shadows left me to die in them. Nia kept reading, heart pounding. Elliot's letter detailed everything: mission dates, locations, the names of officers who'd commanded him, the bureaucratic labyrinth that had buried his benefits under layers of classified red tape. He described applying for disability, being told his service record was too sensitive to process without clearance, being shuffled between departments that each claimed someone else had jurisdiction. He described losing his apartment, his savings, his mind. He described living on the street while the people who'd sent him into harm's way collected pensions and promotions. And then, in the final paragraph, he wrote about Nia. There is a young woman named Nia Harper who has shown me more dignity in 6 months than my country has in 6 years. She doesn't know who I am. She doesn't know what I've done. She just knows I'm hungry and cold and forgotten. Every morning she brings me coffee and a sandwich. Every morning she sees me as a person. If you are reading this, General, it means I'm gone. But Nia is still here. And she deserves to know that the man she fed was not a failure or a ghost. He was a soldier who served with honor and was abandoned by the system he trusted. Please tell her that. And please, do something so that no one else ends up like me. Nia set the letter down, eyes burning. She couldn't speak. Sloan leaned forward. Elliot Cross was exactly who he said he was. His file is so heavily classified that even I had trouble accessing parts of it. But what I could confirm is this. He flew Black Hawk helicopters for a joint task force operating in denied areas, places we officially have no presence. He completed over 200 missions. He was awarded commendations that can't be publicly acknowledged. And when he applied for benefits, his case got flagged because his service history couldn't be verified without clearances that required approvals from people who no longer existed in the chain of command. So they just gave up on him. Nia's voice cracked. Worse, they forgot about him. His case sat in a queue for 3 years. No follow-up, no appeals, no oversight. He fell through a gap in the system that shouldn't exist but does, over and over again. How many others? Nia asked. Sloan's jaw tightened. Too many. Classified service creates classified problems. Veterans who can't prove where they served. Medics who can't access their own medical records. Soldiers who were told their injuries never happened because the missions never happened. It's a rot at the core of how we treat people who do the work we can't admit exists. And you're going to fix it? I'm going to try, but I need your help. Nia blinked. My help? I'm nobody. I clean floors for a living. You're the person Elliot trusted with his story. You're the person who kept showing up when everyone else walked past. That makes you someone. Sloan stood, walked to the window, hands clasped behind her back. I'm launching a formal investigation into the handling of classified service veterans' benefits. It's going to be ugly. People are going to push back. Careers are going to end. But if we're going to make real change, we need a face for this story. Someone who can stand in front of Congress and make them understand what their bureaucracy actually does to people. You want me to testify? Nia's voice was barely a whisper. I want you to tell the truth about Elliot, about what you saw, about what it means when the system forgets the people who sacrifice everything. I don't know how to do that. You already did. You wrote the address on an envelope and put it in the mail. Everything after that is just showing up and speaking. Nia looked down at her hands, still stained around the edges from years of cleaning chemicals, and thought about Elliot sitting on that bench every morning, waiting for someone to remember he existed. Okay, she said quietly. I'll do it. Sloan turned, and for the first time, something like respect flickered in her eyes. Good. We have a Senate subcommittee hearing scheduled in 6 weeks. I'll have my team prepare you. You'll have support every step of the way. What happens after? After, we see if the truth is enough to change anything. The preparation was brutal. Nia spent 3 weeks in D.C., working with Sloan's legal team, JAG officers who drilled her on testimony, communications specialists who taught her how to stay calm under hostile questioning, investigators who walked her through every detail of Elliot's case so she could answer questions without hesitation. They put her up in a modest hotel near Capitol Hill. They bought her professional clothes, real ones, tailored, nothing from Goodwill. They fed her 3 meals a day and paid her $200 a day for her time. It was more money than she'd ever had at once, but the work was exhausting. What will you say if they ask why you helped him? One of the JAG officers asked during a practice session. Because he was hungry. They'll say he was a drunk, a drug addict. That he didn't deserve help. And I'll say I didn't help him because of what he deserved. I helped him because he was human. The officer nodded. Good. Remember that. They ran her through mock hearings, firing questions designed to rattle her, testing her composure. Some of the questions were brutal. Why should taxpayers fund benefits for people who can't even prove they served? How do we know you're not just trying to get attention? What makes you qualified to speak about military policy? Nia learned to breathe through the anger, to keep her voice steady, to look the questioner in the eye and answer without flinching. But the worst part wasn't the questions. It was the moments alone in her hotel room at night, when the enormity of what she was about to do crashed over her like a wave. She was a 22-year-old woman with a GED and 2 jobs, about to stand in front of the United States Senate and call out a system that had been failing people for decades. What if she screwed up? What if she froze? What if no one listened? She called Marcus one night, voice shaking. I don't think I can do this. Yes, you can. I'm nobody, Marcus. Why would anyone care what I have to say? Because you're the only one saying it, and because that man trusted you when he didn't trust anyone else. You owe it to him to finish this. Nia closed her eyes, breathed deep. Yeah, you're right. I know I am. Now get some sleep. You got work to do. She hung up, stared at the ceiling, and tried to believe him. 3 days before this hearing, Sloan's team hit a wall. Nia was in a conference room reviewing her testimony when Colonel Tamblyn walked in, face tight. We have a problem. Nia looked up. What kind of problem? Someone's trying to sanitize your testimony. The Senate Oversight Committee received a memo suggesting your statement should be adjusted for clarity and focus. Translation. They want to soften it, remove the parts that make people uncomfortable. Who sent the memo? We're not sure yet, but it came from inside the Department of Defense. Nia's stomach dropped. So they're trying to bury it before I even speak? They're trying to control the narrative, make you sound like a sympathetic volunteer instead of a whistleblower. They want you to talk about Elliot's service, his sacrifice, his honor, but not about the system that destroyed him. What do we do? Sloan walked in, face like stone. We ignore them. You go in there and say exactly what you plan to say. They can't edit live testimony. But if the committee's been told to expect something different, then they'll be surprised. Good. Surprises make people pay attention. Sloan sat down across from Nia. This is the moment they try to control you. They'll offer you a script. They'll tell you it's for your own good, that it'll be more effective, that you'll sound more credible. Don't take it. I won't. Promise me. Because the second you let them soften your words, Elliot's story becomes just another bureaucratic footnote. Nia met her eyes. I promise. Sloan nodded, stood, and walked to the door. Then she paused, looked back. You're about to walk into a room full of people who think you don't matter. Prove them wrong. The hearing was held in the Dirksen Senate Office Building, a marble fortress 3 blocks from the Capitol. Nia arrived early, escorted by Tamblyn and 2 other officers, and was led through back hallways to a small waiting room. She sat alone, hands folded in her lap, and tried to keep her breathing steady. The door opened. A young staffer in a suit stepped in, holding a folder. Ms. Harper? I'm David Chen, counsel for the subcommittee. I just wanted to go over a few things before you testify. Okay. He sat down, opened the folder, pulled out a document. We've prepared a recommended statement for you. It hits all the key points, but streamlines the language for clarity. Nia took the paper, scanned it. It was garbage. Every sharp edge had been sanded down. Every accusation had been softened into a suggestion. The part where she called out the VA for abandoning Elliot had been rewritten as challenges in processing complex cases. The part where she described finding him bleeding in an alley had been reduced to Mr. Cross experienced medical difficulties. She set the paper down. No. Chen blinked. I'm sorry? I'm not reading this. Ms. Harper, I understand you're nervous, but this version is more appropriate for... I don't care what's appropriate. I'm telling the truth. The truth can be inflammatory. We're trying to help you avoid unnecessary controversy. Nia stood, voice hard. Elliot died in unnecessary controversy. I'm not sanitizing it to make people comfortable. Chen's expression shifted, annoyance barely masked by professionalism. I strongly advise, noted. Now get out. He stared at her, clearly unused to being dismissed. Then he picked up his folder and left without another word. Nia sat back down, heart pounding, hands shaking. She'd just burned a bridge she didn't even know she was standing on, but she didn't care. Elliot had trusted her with the truth, and she wasn't going to trade it for anyone's approval. 20 minutes later, Colonel Tamblyn appeared in the doorway, face unreadable. "They're ready for you?" Nia stood, smoothed her blazer with trembling hands, and followed Tamblyn down a hallway lined with portraits of stern-faced men in outdated suits. The marble floors echoed with every step, the sound swallowed by ceilings too high to feel human. They stopped outside a set of heavy wooden doors. "You're going to walk in, take the seat at the witness table, and wait for the chairman to address you," Tamblyn said quietly. "Don't speak until you're spoken to. When you do speak, look at the senators, not the cameras. And remember, you're not here to make them like you. You're here to make them listen." Nia nodded, mouth dry. Tamblyn opened the door. The hearing room was bigger than Nia had imagined. Vaulted ceilings, tiered seating, a long curved bench where 7 senators sat like judges at a trial. Behind them, staffers hovered with tablets and briefing books. In the gallery, reporters filled the front rows, cameras already rolling, notepads open. Nia's legs felt like they might give out. She walked to the witness table, a solitary desk facing the senators, and sat down. The microphone in front of her looked like a weapon. The chairman, a white-haired man in his 70s with a voice like gravel and a face carved from decades of political battles, leaned into his own microphone. "This hearing of the Senate Subcommittee on Veterans Affairs will now come to order. Today we are examining systemic failures in the processing of benefits for veterans with classified service records. Our witness is Ms. Nia Harper, a private citizen who had a personal relationship with the late Elliot James Cross, a decorated veteran whose case has raised serious questions about our obligations to those who serve in the shadows." He looked directly at Nia, and the weight of his gaze felt like being pinned under a spotlight. "Ms. Harper, thank you for being here. Before we begin questioning, you'll have the opportunity to make an opening statement. The floor is yours." Nia's heart hammered against her ribs. She pulled the microphone closer, hands shaking so hard she had to grip the edge of the table to steady herself. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Nia Harper. I'm 22 years old. I work 2 jobs cleaning office buildings in Philadelphia. And for 6 months, I gave breakfast to a homeless man named Elliot Cross, because nobody else would." Her voice cracked on the last word, but she forced herself to keep going. "I didn't know Elliot was a veteran when I started. I didn't know he'd flown helicopters in places our government won't admit exist. I didn't know he'd been buried under classified red tape so thick that even his medical records were locked behind clearances he couldn't get. All I knew was that he was hungry and cold and invisible." She glanced down at her notes, the ones she'd written herself, not the sanitized script Chen had tried to hand her, and then looked back up at the senators. "Elliot died in a VA hospital 3 months ago. Alone. No service. No honor guard. Just a plain headstone in a system that spent more energy protecting its secrets than protecting the man who kept them. Before he died, he gave me a letter addressed to General Marion Sloan. In that letter, he described 15 years of service to this country and 6 years of being abandoned by it. He described applying for benefits and being told his case was too complicated to process. He described losing everything while waiting for approvals that never came. And he described me, a stranger who showed up with a sandwich, as the only person who treated him like he mattered." Her voice steadied, anger burning through the fear. "I'm not a policy expert. I'm not a veteran. I'm just someone who saw what happens when the system forgets people. And I'm here to tell you that Elliot Cross deserved better, and so do the thousands of others like him who are still waiting for someone to remember they exist." She sat back, hands still trembling, and waited. The room was silent. Then the chairman nodded slowly. "Thank you, Ms. Harper. Senator Garrison, you're recognized for questioning." Senator Garrison, a woman in her 50s, sharp suit, sharper eyes, leaned into her microphone. "Ms. Harper, I appreciate your testimony, but I have to ask, How can we be sure that Mr. Cross's claims were accurate? You said yourself you didn't know him well. How do you know he wasn't exaggerating or fabricating his service record? Naya had been warned this question would come. She met Garrison's eyes. Because General Sloan confirmed it. She spent 2 weeks verifying every detail in Elliot's letter. His service record is real. His missions are real. His abandonment is real. But you personally had no way of knowing that when you were helping him, correct? No, but it didn't matter. He was a human being who needed help. That should have been enough. Garrison's expression flickered, something between respect and irritation. What would you say to taxpayers who are concerned about fraudulent benefit claims? I'd say the system is so broken that real veterans are dying on the street while you're worried about fraud. Elliot Cross flew 200 classified missions. He was shot at, he was traumatized, and he came home to a system that treated him like a filing error. That's not fraud, that's betrayal. A murmur rippled through the gallery. One of the senators, a younger man, mid-40s, expensive haircut, leaned forward. Ms. Harper, I'm Senator Caldwell. I want to be clear about something. You're here because you fed a homeless man. That's admirable. But do you really think you're qualified to speak about military policy and veterans' benefits? The condescension in his voice was a slap. Nia felt heat rise in her chest, but she kept her voice level. No, Senator, I'm not qualified to speak about policy, but I am qualified to speak about what I saw. I saw a man who served his country get treated like garbage. I saw a system that valued paperwork more than people, and I saw what happens when the powerful decide that some lives don't matter enough to fix the process. That's a very emotional response. Damn right it's emotional. The words came out sharper than she intended, but she didn't pull them back. Elliot didn't die because of bad luck. He died because the VA buried his case under classified protocols and then forgot about it. That's not policy failure. That's moral failure. Caldwell's face hardened. Ms. Harper, I understand you're upset, but I'd caution you against making accusations. I'm not accusing. I'm stating facts. Facts that are in the letter Elliot wrote. Facts that General Sloan confirmed. If you don't like hearing them, that's not my problem. It's yours. The room went dead silent. Caldwell stared at her, jaw tight, and for a moment Nia thought he might explode. Then the chairman cleared his throat. Senator Caldwell, your time has expired. Senator Brooks, you're recognized. Brooks was older, quieter, with a face that suggested he'd spent more time listening than talking. He adjusted his glasses and looked at Nia with something that almost resembled kindness. Ms. Harper, you mentioned that Mr. Cross's benefits were delayed due to classified service records. Can you elaborate on what that means for someone watching at home who might not understand the system? Nia took a breath, steadied herself. Elliot's missions were classified. That means there's no public record of where he was or what he did. When he applied for disability benefits, the VA needed to verify his service. But the verification process required security clearances that took years to get, if they got approved at all. His case sat in a queue for 3 years with no follow-up, no appeals, no oversight. By the time anyone looked at it again, he was living on the street. And you believe this is a widespread problem? General Sloan does. She told me there are hundreds of cases like Elliot's, veterans who can't access their own medical records because the records are classified, veterans who can't prove they were injured because the injuries happened on missions that officially never happened. The system is designed to protect secrets, not people, and when you have to choose between the two, people lose every time. Brooks nodded slowly. What would you recommend we do to fix this? Naya hesitated. She hadn't expected a question that actually asked for her opinion. I think you need an independent oversight process for classified service cases. Someone whose job is to cut through the red tape and make sure veterans get the care they were promised. I think you need to stop treating people like filing errors and start treating them like human beings. And I think you need to stop hiding behind bureaucracy when the truth is ugly. That's a tall order. So is asking someone to fly into a war zone and then pretending they don't exist when they come home. Brooks leaned back, and for the first time, something like a smile crossed his face. Thank you, Ms. Harper. I have no further questions. The chairman looked down the line. Any other questions for the witness? Caldwell raised his hand. The chairman sighed but nodded. One more, Senator. Caldwell leaned in, voice dripping with skepticism. Ms. Harper, let me ask you this. You've painted a very emotional picture here today. But at the end of the day, you're a young woman with no military experience, no policy background, and no real understanding of how these systems work. Why should we take your word over the professionals who've been running the VA for decades? Nia stared at him, and something inside her snapped. Because the professionals you're talking about left Elliot Cross to die on the street, Senator. They're the ones who buried his case. They're the ones who forgot he existed. So yeah, maybe I don't have a degree in policy. Maybe I don't know how the bureaucracy works, but I know what a promise looks like. And I kept mine. I showed up every morning with coffee and a sandwich. I didn't ask for his service record. I didn't ask for proof he deserved help. I just helped him. And when he died, I mailed the letter he trusted me with because I wasn't going to let the system bury him twice. She leaned into the microphone, voice shaking with fury and grief. So you want to know why you should listen to me? Because I'm the only person in this room who actually gave a damn about Elliot Cross when he was alive. And now that he's gone, I'm the only one making sure he's not forgotten. That's why. The room erupted. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras swiveled. Staffers whispered to senators. Caldwell's face went red, but he didn't respond. The chairman banged his gavel. Order, Ms. Harper. Thank you for your testimony. You're excused. Nia stood on shaking legs, turned, and walked out of the hearing room. She didn't look back. The hallway outside was chaos. Reporters swarmed her the moment she stepped through the doors. Microphones thrust in her face. Questions shouted over each other. Ms. Harper, do you think your testimony will lead to reform? What would you say to other veterans in similar situations? Are you worried about retaliation from the Department of Defense? Colonel Tamblyn appeared like a shield, pushing through the crowd. No questions. Give her space. She grabbed Nia's arm and steered her toward a side exit, moving fast. They ducked into a stairwell, the noise cutting off as the door slammed shut. Nia leaned against the wall, breathing hard, adrenaline crashing through her system like a drug wearing off. Did I just screw everything up? She asked. Tamblyn shook her head, a rare smile breaking through her professional mask. You just made the front page of every newspaper in the country, and you made Caldwell look like an ass on live television. I'd call that a win. I lost my temper. Good. People need to see someone who actually cares. You did exactly what you were supposed to do. Which was? Tell the truth, and make them uncomfortable with it. Nia closed her eyes, still shaking. Is it over? No, it's just starting. The footage went viral within hours. By the time Nia made it back to her hotel, clips of her testimony were playing on every major news network. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. Conservative outlets praised her for holding government accountable. Progressive outlets celebrated her for speaking truth to power. Social media exploded with hashtags. Justice for Elliot. Remember their names. Fix the VA. Nia sat on the edge of her hotel bed, scrolling through her phone, watching herself on screen over and over. The moment she'd told Caldwell she was the only one who'd given a damn. The way her voice had cracked when she talked about Elliot dying alone. The fury in her eyes when she called the system's failure a moral betrayal. She looked like someone she didn't recognize. Someone strong. Someone who mattered. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. You just made the senator look like a fool. I'm proud of you. She smiled despite everything and texted back. I think I'm in trouble. You've been in trouble since the day you met Elliot. Might as well go all the way. She was about to respond when someone knocked on her door. Nia opened it to find General Sloan standing in the hallway, still in uniform, face unreadable. May I come in? Of course. Sloan stepped inside, closed the door, and turned to face Nia. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then, that was the gutsiest thing I've seen in 30 years of military service. Nia blinked. I thought I went too far. You went exactly far enough. Caldwell's office has already issued a statement saying he misspoke and that he supports further investigation into veterans' benefits. Senator Brooks is drafting legislation to create an independent review board for classified service cases. And the Secretary of Defense just called me personally to ask, what the hell is going on? Is that good or bad? It's leverage, which is the only thing that matters in this town. Sloan sat down in the chair by the window, gestured for Nia to sit on the bed. Here's what happens next. The media storm will last about a week. You'll get interview requests, speaking offers, people trying to turn you into a symbol. My advice? Say no to most of it. Stay focused on Elliot's story. Don't let them turn you into a celebrity. I don't want to be a celebrity. I just want Elliot to be remembered. Then you're already ahead of most people who come through here. Sloan leaned forward. I'm announcing the creation of a task force to investigate systemic failures in veterans' benefits processing, with a specific focus on classified service cases. I want you to be part of it. Nia's breath caught. What? How? As a community advocate, you'll work with my team to identify cases like Elliot's, reach out to veterans who've been buried by the system, and help us build a database of failures we can't ignore. It's paid, full-time, federal salary. I don't know anything about advocacy. You know what it looks like when the system fails. That's more than most advocates ever learn. Sloan stood. Think about it. You've got 48 hours to decide. After that, the job goes to someone else. She walked to the door, paused, looked back. Elliot trusted you with his story because he knew you'd fight for it. Don't stop now. She left. Nia sat alone in the hotel room, mind reeling, and tried to process what had just happened. She'd walked into a Senate hearing as a nobody, a cleaning woman with a high school education and 2 bus passes in her wallet. And she'd walked out as someone the Pentagon wanted on their team. It didn't feel real. But the exhaustion in her bones, the rawness in her throat from holding back tears, the weight of Elliot's memory pressing against her chest, that was real. She pulled out her phone, opened her photos, and scrolled back to the grainy picture she'd taken of Elliot 6 months ago. He was half asleep on the bench, coffee cup in his hand, face peaceful for once. I did it, she whispered to the image. I kept my promise. The photo didn't answer, but somewhere she hoped he knew. 2 days later, Nia accepted the job. She flew back to Philadelphia, gave her 2 weeks' notice to Summit Facilities Management, packed her apartment into boxes that fit in Marcus's car, and said goodbye to the bus stop where she'd met Elliot. The bench was still there, empty, worn, a memorial to a man the world had tried to erase. Nia sat down one last time and looked at the street where she used to wait every morning. I'm leaving, she said quietly. But I'm not forgetting, I promise. The wind picked up, cold and sharp, carrying the scent of rain. Nia stood, zipped her coat, and walked away. She didn't look back. 6 weeks later, Nia was sitting in a Pentagon conference room, reviewing case files with Sloan's investigative team, when Colonel Tamblyn walked in holding a folder. We've got something. Nia looked up. What? Tamblyn set the folder on the table, opened it. Inside was a memo. Department of Defense letterhead, dated 2 weeks after Elliot's death. This is an internal communication recommending the closure of Elliot Cross's benefits case due to lack of claimant follow-up. It was sent 3 days before you mailed his letter to General Sloan. Nia's blood went cold. They were going to close his case? They did close it. Officially, Elliot Cross's claim was denied posthumously for failure to provide additional documentation. The VA was never going to approve his benefits, not while he was alive, and not after he died. Why? Tamblyn's expression darkened. Because approving it would have meant admitting the system failed, and admitting failure opens the door to lawsuits, investigations, and accountability. It was easier to bury him. Nia stared at the memo, hands shaking with rage. Who signed off on this? Deputy Director of Veterans Benefits Administration, a man named Gerald Frost. Where is he now? Still in his position, still making decisions about veterans' benefits. Nia looked at Sloan, who'd been listening in silence. Can we do anything about this? Sloan's face was stone. We're going to do more than that. We're going to make sure Gerald Frost explains himself in front of Congress, and we're going to make sure every case he touched gets reviewed. She stood, walked to the window, looked out at the sprawling Pentagon complex. This is bigger than Elliot now. This is about every veteran who got buried because it was convenient, and we're going to dig them all back up. Nia felt something shift inside her, grief hardening into purpose. Elliot was gone, but his story wasn't, and neither was hers. The investigation moved fast once the media caught wind of Gerald Frost's memo. Within 48 hours, every major news outlet was running stories about the deputy director who'd closed a dead veterans' benefits case to avoid accountability. Frost's photo appeared on morning shows, his name trending on social media alongside words like corruption, betrayal, cover-up. Congressional offices were flooded with calls demanding answers. Veterans advocacy groups issued statements. Former service members shared their own stories of being buried by bureaucracy, and the floodgates opened. Nia watched it all from her new desk in the Pentagon, a small workspace tucked into Sloan's investigative unit, and felt the weight of what they'd started pressing down on her shoulders. This wasn't just about Elliot anymore. This was about every name in every file they pulled, every case that had been quietly closed, every veteran who'd been told their service didn't matter enough to fight for. Sloan called an emergency team meeting on a Friday morning. Nia walked into the conference room to find a dozen investigators, JAG officers, and policy analysts already assembled. Tamblyn stood at the front, projector screen displaying a chart that made Nia's stomach turn. Over the past 6 weeks, we've identified 217 cases matching Elliot Cross's profile, Tamblyn began. Veterans with classified service records whose benefits claims were delayed, denied, or abandoned due to bureaucratic obstruction. 83 of those veterans are currently homeless, 42 are deceased. The rest are trapped in appeals processes that have lasted anywhere from 3 to 11 years. Nia stared at the numbers, each one a life the system had chewed up and spit out. Sloan stood, arms crossed. We're taking this to Congress in 2 weeks. Senator Brooks has scheduled a follow-up hearing specifically focused on systemic failures. Frost will be subpoenaed. So will the current VA administrator and the Assistant Secretary for Veterans Affairs. This is going to be ugly. One of the JAG officers raised a hand. What's our exposure if Frost tries to claim he was following protocol? Then we prove the protocol is rotten, Sloan said flatly. We've got the files, we've got the timelines, we've got veterans who are willing to testify. Frost can claim he was following orders all he wants. We'll show that the orders themselves were designed to fail people. She turned to Nia. You're testifying again, but this time you won't be alone. We've identified 12 veterans from our case files who are willing to speak publicly. You'll be part of a panel. Nia's throat tightened. What do you need me to say? Same thing you said last time. The truth. But now you'll have voices backing you up, people who lived through the same nightmare Elliot did. Frost and his people are going to try to dismiss you as an outlier, a single case, an anomaly. We're going to show them it's the norm. Tamblyn clicked to the next slide. Faces appeared on the screen, men and women, different ages, different backgrounds, all wearing the same haunted expression Nia had seen in Elliot's eyes. These are the 12, Tamblyn said. Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, all classified service, all buried by the system, and all still fighting. Nia studied their faces and felt something harden in her chest. This was what Elliot had wanted, not just justice for himself, but a reckoning for everyone the system had left behind. When do I meet them? She asked. Tomorrow. We're flying them into D.C. for prep sessions. You'll work with them over the next 10 days to coordinate testimony. Nia nodded, mind already racing. What happens after the hearing? Sloan's expression was grim. If we do this right, legislation, oversight reform, maybe even criminal charges if we can prove intentional obstruction. If we don't, Frost gets a slap on the wrist, the VA issues a statement about lessons learned, and nothing changes. Then we do it right. Damn straight we do, Sem. The 12 veterans arrived the next day. Nia met them in a Pentagon briefing room that had been converted into a workspace. Tables arranged in a circle, coffee and water stations set up, whiteboards covered in timelines and case summaries. They filed in one by one, some in wheelchairs, some using canes, all carrying the weight of years spent fighting a system that didn't want to be fought. Tamblyn made introductions. Nia shook hands, memorized names, listened to fragments of stories that all sounded like Elliot's in different keys. There was Marcus Reed, a former Navy SEAL who'd spent 8 years waiting for approval on a PTSD claim because his missions were too classified to verify. There was Sonia Alvarez, an Army medic who'd treated casualties in black site hospitals that officially didn't exist and now couldn't access her own medical records. There was James Kuhn, a Marine Force recon operator who'd lost his leg in an operation the government still denied happened, leaving him ineligible for the prosthetics he needed. Each story was a knife to the chest. Each one proof that Elliot hadn't been an exception. He'd been the rule. They spent the first day just talking. Not testimony prep, not strategy. Just stories. Sharing the weight they'd all been carrying alone. And somewhere in the middle of it, Nia realized she wasn't just helping them. They were helping her. Because for the first time since Elliot died, she wasn't the only person in the room who understood what it meant to watch someone get erased. On the third day, they started working on testimony. Sloan's team had drafted opening statements for each veteran, but Nia could see immediately that the language was wrong. Too polished. Too detached. The kind of careful phrasing designed to avoid offense instead of demand accountability. "This isn't going to work," Nia said quietly, looking at the draft in front of Marcus Reed. Reed glanced at her. "What do you mean?" "It sounds like a press release. It doesn't sound like you." They said it needed to be professional. Professional doesn't mean sanitized. When I testified, they tried to give me a script too. I threw it out, and it worked because I sounded like a real person, not a talking point. Sonia Alvarez leaned forward. "So what are you saying? We rewrite these ourselves?" "I'm saying you tell your story the way you'd tell it to someone who actually cares, not the way you think a senator wants to hear it." Reed looked at the draft again, then crumpled it up and tossed it in the trash. "All right, let's do it your way." They spent the next week rewriting every statement. Nia sat with each veteran, asked questions, pulled out the details that mattered, the moments that revealed the human cost of bureaucratic failure. The night Marcus Reed slept in his car because he couldn't afford rent while waiting for benefits. The time Sonia Alvarez was turned away from a VA hospital because her service record was flagged as classified and the staff didn't know how to process her. The year James Kuhn spent learning to walk on a jury-rigged prosthetic because the VA claimed his injury wasn't service-related. By the time they finished, the statements were raw, unpolished, and devastating. Tamblyn reviewed them and shook her head in disbelief. "If you read these on the record, half the committee is going to walk out." "Good," Nia said. "Let them walk. At least they'll know we're serious." Sloan read through the drafts and looked up at Nia with something close to pride. "You've learned fast." "I had a good teacher." "Elliot?" "Yeah." The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in late November. The same room, the same marble and wood and vaulted ceilings. But this time, Nia wasn't alone at the witness table. She sat in the middle of a long row, Marcus Reed to her left, Sonia Alvarez to her right, 10 other veterans flanking them like a battalion assembled for one last mission. The gallery was packed. Reporters filled every seat. Cameras lined the back wall. Veteran advocacy groups wore matching shirts. And in the front row, Nia spotted faces she recognized from her last testimony. Staffers, analysts, people who'd watched her call out the system and were back to see if she'd do it again. The chairman, same white-haired man, same gravel voice, called the hearing to order. Today, we continue our examination of systemic failures in Veterans Benefits Administration. We are joined by a panel of veterans whose service to this country has been met with obstruction, delay, and denial. Also testifying will be Mr. Gerald Frost, Deputy Director of the Veterans Benefits Administration, who will address specific allegations of misconduct. Frost sat at a separate table off to the side, flanked by lawyers, face pale and tight. He looked like a man who knew the walls were closing in. The chairman gestured to Nia and the veterans. "Ms. Harper, you and your fellow witnesses may proceed with opening statements." Nia leaned into the microphone. Her hands didn't shake this time. "Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for allowing us to speak. My name is Nia Harper, and I'm here today representing the memory of Elliot James Cross, a veteran who died waiting for the benefits he earned. I'm joined by 12 veterans who are still waiting. They're going to tell you their stories, and when they're done, you're going to have a choice. You can listen or you can look away, but if you look away, you're complicit in every failure that comes after this." She sat back. Marcus Reed took over. "My name is Marcus Reed. I spent 15 years as a Navy SEAL. I ran operations in 7 countries you'll never read about. When I came home, I applied for PTSD treatment through the VA. They told me my service couldn't be verified without classified clearances. I waited 8 years, no treatment, no support. I lived in my car for 14 months because I couldn't hold down a job, and the whole time the VA kept telling me my case was under review. He passed the microphone to Sonia Alvarez. My name is Sonia Alvarez. I was an Army trauma medic. I treated gunshot wounds, shrapnel injuries, burns, things you don't forget. When I tried to access my own medical records for a disability claim, I was told they were classified. I couldn't prove I'd been injured because the injuries happened in places that don't exist, so the VA denied my claim, twice. I'm still fighting. One by one, the veterans spoke. Each story a variation on the same theme: service without recognition, sacrifice without support, promises broken by the people who'd made them. By the time James Kuhn finished describing the homemade prosthetic he'd built in his garage because the VA wouldn't cover a real one, the room was silent. The chairman cleared his throat. Thank you. Mr. Frost, you're recognized for response. Frost stood, adjusted his tie, and walked to the microphone. His voice was careful, rehearsed, the tone of a man trying to control a fire that was already out of control. Mr. Chairman, let me begin by saying that the Veterans Benefits Administration takes these allegations very seriously. We are committed to serving those who served, and we recognize that our processes have not always met the standards our veterans deserve. Naya felt her jaw tighten, carefully worded non-apologies, bureaucratic deflection, the same playbook that had buried Elliot. Frost continued. However, I must clarify that the cases described today involve complex classified service records that require extensive verification protocols. These protocols exist to protect national security and ensure benefits are awarded appropriately. While I sympathize with the frustration these delays cause, the processes in place are necessary. Marcus Reed cut him off. Necessary for who? Because they sure as hell weren't necessary for me when I was sleeping in my car. Frost blinked, thrown off script. I understand your frustration, Mr. Reed, but do you? Sonia Alvarez leaned into her microphone. Do you understand what it's like to be told your injuries don't exist because the government won't admit you were there? Frost's lawyers whispered urgently in his ear. He held up a hand. I am not here to debate individual cases. Why not? Naya's voice cut through the room like a blade. You closed Elliot Cross's case 3 days before I mailed his letter to General Sloan. You recommended denial because it was easier than admitting your system failed him. So yeah, Mr. Frost, let's talk about individual cases. Let's talk about the 217 veterans your office buried. Let's talk about the 83 who are homeless right now because you decided their service wasn't worth the paperwork. Frost's face went red. That is a gross mischaracterization. Is it? Nia pulled a document from the folder in front of her, the memo Tamblyn had found, the one recommending closure of Elliot's case. She held it up. This is your signature, Mr. Frost. You personally approved the closure of a dead man's benefits claim to avoid accountability. That's not a mischaracterization. That's a fact. The gallery erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. Frost's lawyers were on their feet, objecting, but the chairman banged his gavel. Order! Ms. Harper, that document is not part of the official record. Then let's make it part of the record. Nia stood, walked to the chairman's bench, and handed him the memo. Everything in there is documented. Dates, signatures, recommendations. Mr. Frost can claim he was following protocol all he wants, but the protocol is designed to fail people, and he knew it. The chairman studied the memo, face darkening. He looked at Frost. Mr. Frost, did you personally recommend the closure of Elliot Cross's benefits claim? Frost hesitated, trapped. I approved a recommendation based on administrative guidelines. That's a yes or no question. Yes, but no further questions. The chairman set the memo down, expression grim. This committee will be launching a full investigation into the Veterans Benefits Administration's handling of classified service cases. Mr. Frost, you are hereby placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of that investigation. This hearing is adjourned. The gavel came down. The room exploded. The aftermath was chaos. Reporters mobbed Nia and the veterans as they left the hearing room. Questions came from every direction, microphones shoved in faces, cameras everywhere. Tamblyn and a team of security personnel formed a wall, pushing through the crowd, but Nia caught fragments of questions that told her everything she needed to know. Miss Harper, do you think Frost will face criminal charges? What do you say to critics who claim this is a politically motivated attack? Are you satisfied with the committee's response? Tamblyn got them into a side hallway, away from the press, and the noise finally faded. The 12 veterans stood in a cluster, breathing hard, adrenaline still pumping. Marcus Reed looked at Nia. Did we just end that guy's career? I think we just ended more than that, Nia said. Sloane appeared at the end of the hallway, walking fast. When she reached them, her expression was unreadable. That was not subtle. We weren't trying to be subtle, Nia said. Good, because the Secretary of Defense just called me, again. He wants a meeting tomorrow to discuss immediate reforms to veterans' benefits oversight. Translation, they're panicking. What does that mean for us? Sloane's face shifted into something that might have been a smile. It means you just scared the hell out of the most powerful bureaucracy in the world. And now they're scrambling to fix things before you scare them again. She pulled out her phone, scrolled through messages. Senator Brooks is drafting emergency legislation to create an independent review board for classified service cases, exactly what you recommended in your first testimony. The VA administrator just resigned, and 3 major veterans organizations have pledged funding for legal support to help veterans trapped in appeals. All of that happened in the last 40 minutes. Nia felt her knees go weak. We did that? You did that, all of you. Sloane looked at the group of veterans, her voice softening just slightly. Elliot Cross started this fight. You finished it. And you didn't just win. You changed the system. Sam. 3 months later, Nia stood in Arlington National Cemetery on a cold February morning, watching a flag-draped casket being lowered into the ground with full military honors. Elliot Cross was finally being buried the way he should have been from the start. A 21-gun salute cracked through the air. A bugler played taps, the notes mournful and perfect. An honor guard folded the flag with precision and handed it to Nia, because she was the closest thing to family Elliot had left. She held the flag against her chest, the weight of it almost unbearable, and thought about the man who'd sat on a bench every morning waiting for someone to remember he existed. General Sloane stood beside her in full dress uniform, along with the 12 veterans who'd testified. Marcus Reed, Sonia Alvarez, James Kuhn, all of them there to honor a man they'd never met, but whose fight had become theirs. When the ceremony ended, Sloane walked with Nia to the grave, now marked with a proper headstone, name, rank, service dates, and a single line Nia had requested. He kept his promise. He'd be proud of you, Sloane said quietly. I just did what he asked. You did more than that. You turned his story into a law. The legislation had passed 2 weeks earlier, the Elliot Cross Veterans Accountability Act, creating an independent oversight board with authority to fast-track classified service cases, mandating annual audits of benefits processing, and establishing a fund to provide emergency housing and medical support for veterans stuck in bureaucratic limbo. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And it carried Elliot's name. What happens now? Nia asked. Sloane handed her a folder. Now you get back to work. We've identified 43 new cases in the past month alone, veterans who heard about the law and came forward. They need someone to fight for them the way you fought for Elliot. Nia opened the folder, scanned the names, the faces, the stories that all echoed the same desperation. I'll do it. I know you will. Sloane walked away, leaving Nia alone at the grave. She knelt down, touched the cold stone, and spoke the words she'd been holding since the day Elliot died. I kept my promise. You're remembered now, and you're not alone anymore. The wind stirred, carrying the faint scent of rain, and for a moment Nia could almost hear his voice. You're a good kid. She stood, zipped her coat, and walked back toward the car where Tamblyn was waiting, but she didn't leave right away. Instead, she pulled out her phone and opened her email. Dozens of messages from veterans who'd seen the hearings, read the news, heard about the law. Each one a story, each one a person the system had tried to erase. She scrolled through them, reading names, making notes, building a list, because the fight wasn't over. It never would be. As long as there were people falling through cracks, there would be work to do. And Nia Harper, 22 years old, former cleaning woman, the girl who'd fed a homeless man breakfast every morning, was going to do it. Wow. 6 months later, Nia stood at a different bus stop. Not Elmwood Avenue, not Philadelphia, a transit station in Atlanta, early morning, the city just waking up. A young man sat on the bench, maybe 25, gaunt, wearing a field jacket with the sleeves rolled up. His eyes had the same hollow look Elliot's had, the same exhaustion, the same invisible weight. Nia walked over holding a paper bag. "Morning," she said. He looked up, wary. "Morning." She handed him the bag. "Coffee. Sandwich. Figured you might be hungry." He stared at it like it was a trick. "Why?" "Because I used to know someone who needed the same thing, and I made a promise to keep showing up." He took the bag slowly, opened it, looked inside. His hands shook slightly. "Thank you," he said, voice rough. "You got a name?" "Derek." "I'm Nia. You a veteran, Derek?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Marines, 2 tours." "You connected with the VA?" "Tried, got lost in the system." Nia sat down beside him, pulled out a business card, her new title printed in clean black letters. Community Advocate, Veterans Oversight Task Force. "I work for a program that helps veterans navigate benefits, especially the ones who get lost. If you're willing, I can help you get connected." Derek looked at the card, then at her, suspicion warring with hope. "For real?" "For real." He took the card, slipped it into his pocket. "I don't got money for this." "Don't need money, just need you to show up when we call." "Why would you do that?" Nia thought of Elliot, of the bench, of the promise she'd made to a dying man that had become the purpose of her life. "Because someone did it for me once, and I'm paying it forward." Derek nodded slowly, took a bite of the sandwich, and for the first time, something in his face softened. Nia stood, zipped her coat. "I'll call you in 2 days. Make sure you answer." "I will." She walked away back toward the car where Tamblyn was waiting to drive her to the next city, the next case, the next veteran who needed someone to fight for them. Because this was the real victory. Not the hearing, not the law, not the headlines or the reforms or the general's praise. The victory was sitting on a bench beside someone the world had forgotten and saying, "I see you. You matter. And I'm not leaving." Elliot Cross had been buried with full honors, his name carved into legislation, his story told in Senate chambers and newsrooms across the country. But his real legacy wasn't marble or law or headlines. It was Nia Harper, walking into the cold morning air with a paper bag in her hand, looking for the next person who needed to know they weren't invisible. The system had tried to erase Elliot. Instead, he became a fire that wouldn't go out. And Nia was the one carrying the flame.